Did he flip that over?
Yeah, he puts it up in his mouth.
That's really incredible.
Yeah. He's a smart little man.
He is really smart. He wanted to get the info off the back of this business card. How funny is that? Anyway, welcome back. Oh, and another thing. Here for another week of podcasting, another week of current events, news, maybe some culture.
You didn't get me that time.
I didn't get her that time. She like, you knew? How'd you know?
Yeah,
How'd you know?
You just had a way about you.
I had a way about me?
Dang it. You're talking to the folks.
Dang it. I'll get her next week. I'll try to get her next week. If you didn't know, there's I can't talk about it because then that changes it from being a weekly bit. So you just have to go back and listen to all the old pods and find out what you've missed. Anyway, welcome back again. Oh, another thing, your host, Vince Patrone. Giovanna here, fact-checking us and keeping us on track. Where's Bert Beans? Where's Bert? There he is. Hi, Bert. Bert's our producer. He's just kind of milling around the studio these days. It's hard to get him to actually sit down and do any goddamn work. But instead, he just kind of mills around anymore. So that's his new role. Anyway, so welcome back. We have plenty to talk about this week. Pull up
okay.
Oh, there he is.
Okay.
He's here to work. He said, all right.
Walking over the computers.
Here to work. All right. Anyway,
Don't
so
lick that.
what's he trying to lick?
My espresso.
Oh, he's trying to. So the biggest change to the Oh and Another Thing studio is this week we've come into a Nespresso machine.
Well, not a Nespresso machine.
A Mixpresso machine.
A Mixpresso.
But it makes Nespressos, so we'll take it. And it's been an absolute delight. We are both absolutely loaded up on Mixpressos right now. Woo!
Could use another.
Could use another?
Could use another.
How much coffee do you drink nowadays?
I drink 8 cups. But like not 8 cups like you would get at like a coffee shop, like 8 cups, you guys know it, in like a Mr. Coffee type of 8 cups. So like 2/3 of the pot. Throughout the day. Spread out throughout the day. Over like 8 hours. So like a cup an hour. For 8 hours. And I drink water in between sometimes, so.
Sometimes. I was looking for a water cup. I don't see water anywhere in the room. We have no water in here.
There's an empty one.
We have 2 empty glasses. So we have... I'm going to give you guys a breakdown before we dive into things here, because I still got to get my notes and all that pulled up, or at least the headlines here. On our desk, we have 2 empty jars, and I'm realizing now that we almost drink exclusively out of jars and jar-shaped receptacles. My favorite drinking vessel these days is an old sauce jar that we have. You can get literally like 32 ounces of water in there, and it's like just drink like 3 of those and you're fine, you know, and you're like hydrated for the day. I have one of those before I go for my ride every morning, with a little grapefruit juice, you know, just to keep the enzymes going, or whatever they say grapefruit juice does. But anyway, diving on in now to some headlines here. We'll start with politics today, then shift over to some better COVID-19 news. Things have gotten somewhat better. Not great, but better. We're back to where we were in October, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But again, first... Yeah, that's what the fucking Times said today. Here, I'll pull that up. Since we're talking about it, we'll just go right to it.
Is that well? That's probably like countrywide, right?
Yeah, countrywide.
I checked the countrywide.
Countrywide.
I'm always checking the New York City numbers, and I know last time I checked, we were where we were in like early December,
okay,
which is still a lot better for us here. But
I have it. Do you want me to do COVID headlines in like actual podcaster voice?
I don't know.
I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
The United States is averaging fewer than 70,000 new cases a day for the first time since October. Deaths are down from their peak, but about 2,000 deaths continue to be announced nationwide on most days. Earlier this week, the country surpassed 500,000 total deaths.
Everybody just turned off the podcast.
Millions of people.
So, it is hard to do news like that. I don't know why. That's how the whole entire The Daily is. I don't know why.
Some people like it.
This is Michael Barbaro.
Anyway, awful. Get me out here. So anyway, so the news is somewhat better though. If we are talking coronavirus, the United States is again averaging fewer than 70,000 new cases a day. That is for the first time since October. That was the last time we went anywhere You'll recall the last time we left of New York. No, doesn't work. The last time we were Old New York Town. That's what it is. Last time we were at Old New York Town was October. What day is Gianna's birthday?
October 19th.
October 19th. Thank you. So we were in Pennsylvania for that. So that means we are back to where we were technically then, which means maybe it's safe for people to get out and about. We'd rather everybody not, but deaths are down from their peak, which is good. About 2,000 deaths a day, which is still 1 9/11 a day. More than 1 9/11 a day. That's 2 9/11s a day?
I wasn't listening for the first half.
How many people died on 9/11?
I think it's almost...
How am I supposed to know that? She has got the...
I don't know the exact number.
I'm pulling it up. I can
think
casual.
it's something like that. I think you were close, at least.
Oh, wow. That's more than I thought. Okay, so never mind. So we are averaging less than 1 9/11 a day right now. Even so, still just a shocking amount of death. And good news to be below a 9/11 a day finally, because I feel like we've been averaging that for a long, long time now, so it's good to be back below that. Again, 500,000 deaths over the course of a year. A lot of failures along the way to that, but good news is that millions of people are being vaccinated. Now, every week, about 13% of the population has received at least one dose, and about 6% has been fully vaccinated. 13% right here, half vaccinated, Vince is. Case numbers remain stubbornly high in New York and New Jersey, which have been reporting new infections at some of the highest rates in the country right now, which you can probably just say that's mass transit and just general crowding probably leading to that, because you look outside, we have people here that we're all masked up. We all have our masks on, but the only thing I can really think that would cause some of that in the tri-state area would be just how many of us there are here and the public transit, because I know they say the subway is okay, and I'm no expert, but we've all been on the subway, and this is nothing to like. Well, maybe we haven't all been on the subway. All the listeners out there haven't, but everybody in this room, including Bertram, actually, has been on the MTA at least once. Bert used to be a conductor for the MTA. He's telling us.
Oh, Bert, that's glamorous.
Yeah, he goes, you used to drive the 6.
Ooh.
Interesting. Anyway, so we know
They can see it.
that though it's not like. It's not the dirtiest place in the world, though you could argue that the N train station at Herald Square might be one of the worst smelling places in the world. One could argue.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I never recall being
That's
maybe.
burnt hair diarrhea zone.
What about Chambers Street?
Chambers Street is dilapidated, but Chambers Street does not
It
smell.
doesn't smell, but if you look up at the ceiling, that was going around Twitter for a while. Everyone was saying if you've ever been in the Chambers Street subway station, the vaccine is fine.
Yeah,
like, you can get the vaccine.
And this isn't even just about the stations, but once you start, because luckily for me, our stations are all above ground that I go to for the most part, aside from when I go to Spring Street. But Spring Street, shout out to Spring Street being a pretty well-maintained station. Shout out to them. But they're saying the air inside the cars is okay, and that is the
Didn't
filtration
they add
system.
in some sort of new filtration system?
So they
to
said
make it
that
safer?
works, but then they had a study out last week that said that doesn't work as well as they're saying it does. So like, I'm glad I'm riding my bike, obviously, for more reasons than that. But that's the real added reason for why I got the bike is to avoid the subway air. And I bet that's part of why those numbers are still so high, just because you put 50 people on a train car at 7 a.m. Likely not everybody has the best masks. Not everybody could be wearing a mask or wearing a mask properly. So you're still going to have some spread whenever you have that kind of crowding on a very, very small tube below ground. So that's just part of it. But hopefully things will get better there, and with more vaccines coming, we'll see the numbers continue to keep going down and keep getting better. Across the Great Lakes states, this is again from the New York Times, numbers are plummeting in their words. They were averaging 5,000 cases a day at one point in Indiana. It's now averaging fewer than 1,000. Illinois and Wisconsin and Ohio have also reported declines of more than 30% over the last 2 weeks. All good news for a pandemic that we're approaching milestones for coronavirus, which is really not milestones, but like calendar dates. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but yesterday was the anniversary of Larry Kudlow's famous "We Have This Contained" speech, where he said, not controlled, but we have it contained. And that was whenever we were still down around 12, 15 cases. And now look where we are. So we're on the anniversaries of a lot of people's last times going out, last times people went to events. The last major event we went to was the Lumineers concert the day before Valentine's, or was it Valentine's Day itself? Day before Valentine's, 2020. And what were we talking about last night? We were talking about something that it dawned on us what a lost year felt like.
Yeah.
Because it hadn't really happened yet. What were we talking about?
Oh, we were talking about the governor's
Yes.
race. We were talking about when Cuomo would be up for re-election, if that even happens, which I think you'll get to.
We'll get to that a little bit here. We can maybe pile it in here.
Yeah, but we were talking about how, like, when he was up for re-election, I was saying 2022, and then you were like, oh my God, we voted for him, or we didn't vote for him, but like, the last governor election was in 2018.
2018, yeah.
And the fact that was
like we were talking about how Cynthia Nixon was a major player and she's still a player in the political scene here in New York, but Cynthia Nixon was everywhere, and that was 2 years ago. Cause
we voted for AOC in 2018.
Yeah, like we were thinking about
3 years since she got in, which is wild.
Just thinking about the things that we've done
since,
because I know that was 2018, but then like 2019, it makes sense. But then since 2020 was totally.
We're coming for you. Leave it all in, raw, unedited.
Well, that stays. That stays. We don't do any edits to this podcast. You guys get everything pretty much raw out of the bottle here. Raw out of the bottle. What am I saying? What are we? What are we? A bunch of ketchups, Jeeps? What are we? A bunch of ketchups, Jeeps?
I don't like it.
No, but it was weird to just have that all dawn on us, because it did really just feel like yesterday that we were doing our. Did we vote from home for that, or did we vote in person for that?
For what?
For the Cynthia Nixon race. We went in person.
The only thing we voted not in person for, aside from the last election, was there was some public chair thing that they let us vote online, remember?
Yeah, that's right. And for those funding things that Jimmy was doing.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
That was before we had to. That's just how they...
Even so, just like the feeling of that lost year and all those milestones piling up here. I'll get my second dose of coronavirus vaccine on the 1 year, 2 a day, and like 1 year and a day anniversary of the NBA shutting down and a flight from Europe being cornered off, and Trump making his famous okay sound effect at the end of his Oval Office presser. Just wild to think how quickly it all went, and now here we are. Like, just can you even just imagine how we thought that we were fine in the first few weeks of coronavirus, like at my work, just with gloves on. Like, as long as we had gloves on, like, all we were worried about was it clinging to countertops and, like, clinging to cups and people's skins and hands. Yeah. Like, we had no thought that it would just be, like, floating in the air all the time, which is kind of naive of everybody, I guess, in hindsight. But it was a different world. It was a different world.
Well, we were talking about, too, the last person I went out with in, like, that first week of March. I remember my friend and I went to meet at a Panera on 42nd Street or something. And my mom was texting me about coronavirus picking up in New York. And I remember I went to use the bathroom, and I used my elbow to open the door. And I was like, okay, nearly avoided that one. God. And, like, people were, like, they were wiping down COVID. And, like, the employees were wiping down the tables more often than, like, you would normally see. And I was like, oh, this is like, is this a big deal? And I remember I sat down on the subway on the way home, and as I was sitting, I was like, should I be sitting? Should I be touching things? And I had no mask on or anything, because we didn't We didn't know. And we were talking about how for that first month, we were all kind of just getting by the seat of our pants because it was there and we just weren't doing anything.
We had no information about it, no idea what to do. And that's probably what led to...
Yeah, like, I shouldn't have gone out that day, but I didn't go.
Yeah, I know. What an absolute mess that was. What an absolute... Like, what a failure. Like, they should have shut down the city whenever they knew it was here the first time. Like, just fucking stupid.
Well, we had the first case in the U.S. You and I were on a megabus.
Yeah.
On the way home from State College to New York. We were
that was yesterday. That was yesterday. Because
no, it was March 1st.
Are you sure that was March 1st?
March 1st was the first... That might have been the first confirmed death. I think the first confirmed death. There was a milestone that day, and I remember us being on the bus at the same time as the day Pete dropped out of the race and the day a bunch of people started dropping out.
Right,
it was like
holy man.
The first primaries. We're coming up on a year. That was a big milestone.
I was angry tweeting on Megabus that day.
Yeah, we were listening to podcasts about what was going on. Oh my gosh.
Talk about really
just on a bus with a bunch of people in open air,
coming back from State College,
not a care in the world.
Eating.
Oh my god, we ate sandwiches openly with a bunch of people around us. Yeah, so wild.
I can't even get her to walk by a restaurant. That's not true. I know. I'm kidding. Anyway, so there is good news though, and things will be normal again soon. Maybe maybe a better version of normal or a more fun version of normal. I think it's going to feel really good the first few times we go out places. It's going to be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how much fun this is. Holy mackerel. And I'm really excited for that. Anyway, so that's the good news of the pod. Swinging it on over now to the politics side of things here. Where do we dive in at? I guess we'll just read the first paragraph here. So, again... headlines are brought to you by the Washington Post in this segment. Shout out. President Biden on Friday is heading to Houston to survey recovery efforts from winter storms that left millions of Texans without power and clean water amid freezing temperatures, and also gave us probably the greatest political scandal in the past 3 weeks. So shout out and thank you to Ted Cruz. He is also scheduled to visit a mass vaccination facility in the city. That's Houston's, whatever they're calling it now. I have no idea what they named. I think it used to be Reliant Stadium, Reliant K Stadium, if you will. That's a band. Reliant K is a band. I don't know if people... Is Reliant K a band? I know that for some reason. Anyway, they're using it as a... Yeah, it is a band. Hell yeah. They're using it as a vaccination facility, as New York is using Citi Field right out here in Exborough, out here in Queens. People know we're in Queens. They don't know where in Queens, but in Queens. And then also in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium. They've set them up in a lot of places. They're doing this. Anyway, he's going to go there. I think he's going to give remarks.
No.
What are you doing? Stop. What are you doing? He's just going to the window.
I know, but he's stepping on all my stuff.
Yeah, but he's so sweet.
Yeah, but he's got corn paws.
He does have corn paws. Anyway, so we think he's giving remarks from there. I'm not positive if he is or not, but while in Houston, the House is expected to debate and ultimately pass the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package. That has been that's the whatchamacallit, the budget resolution that we talked about a couple weeks ago here. It includes the $1,400 stimulus checks, a bunch of other provisions that we talked about on the pod 2 weeks ago, and as well as the raise to the minimum wage. However, speed bump on that, as was expected, almost kind of foreseen from, the chatter online, was that the $15 an hour minimum wage increase might not fit the legality of a budget resolution. And last night, the Senate parliamentarian, a totally unelected position, that just kind of gets to wield out rules here and there and decide when parliamentary rules are being broken and when not, and when to rule on them, decided last night that the Senate's rules do not allow for a minimum wage increase in a budget resolution, at least not along those lines. So to counter that, and this is not from the White House, this is from Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders. The new plan is, and I think it's a good plan because they could have easily just abandoned it and said what they usually do and say, oh, well, not this time around. We'll come back and we'll get them next time. They are going to try to get a provision into the Senate bill because obviously this will pass in the House, and obviously it would pass in the Senate with 51 votes, with Kamala being the tie-breaking vote. Could we find a way to keep Joe Manchin and fucking Kristen Sinema in line? But God forbid they just do a party line vote. I know they're from kind of redder states, so it's harder for them to do that kind of thing. But minimum wage is a pretty popular issue. Minimum wage increase and going to 15 is pretty popular. And I know there is always the conversation of, well, smaller states can't really afford that because they have less people and less money at businesses being spent anyway, so how could they ever afford $15 an hour? Easy enough solution. You set up a government program or a government like a refund or a rebate or a loan program for small businesses to pay their workers, and you do it via a tax. And it'd be easy enough to do that. New York and larger states like California and Illinois and places with major cities already pay smaller states without large cities, places like Kentucky and your Iowas and your Kansases and your Dakotas and any state with small population that you could really think of. A lot of those states get supported already by the federal government and by states paying almost a revenue sharing situation almost. And there's no reason that they couldn't expand that into giving people a livable wage. It's just something they need to, do. Because it is simple enough, You figure states are already propping up big states already prop up small states financially speaking. Why can't we just do that with workers' wages if we're so worried about mom and pop in fucking Indiana paying their wait staff $15 an hour? Why don't we tax Amazon? Why don't we tax Target? And why don't we tax these major companies so that they kind of subsidize those wages for those mom and pops that oftentimes they are running out of businesses when they move to these towns sometimes. But that's just the way to think of it legislatively, and God forbid we ever do that. But so what the plan now is for Bernie and Schumer to put in this provision in the Senate once this inevitably passes in the House to penalize major corporations like the ones we just mentioned, Amazon, Target, I don't know, there was a few other on the list. The big boys, your Walmarts and that, to penalize them with major penalties should they not offer $15 an hour starting wages to all employees, which is a step in the right direction and better than it could have turned out, being that obviously the White House backed down pretty quickly from it, as Joe Biden has shown us over the past couple of weeks that he meant a lot of what he said whenever he was speaking in terms of fighting coronavirus, bombing Syria, fixing our alliances abroad, the more moderate stances, and meant less the progressive stances he made in his campaign, and that is kind of expected and was foreseen, and we talked about it here and said how it's going to be the Democratic Party's responsibility to hold the Biden administration accountable whenever they do leave the progressive wings of the Democratic Party just kind of, floating around the big tent kind of aimlessly as they do. And that's what they have done here. So shout out to Schumer and Sanders for, at least taking a shot at another way to get the $15 an hour minimum wage passed whenever the White House has vacated them. But in the meantime, the Biden administration has conducted their first airstrikes in Syria. They believe it killed a number of alleged Iranian-linked fighters. So if you'll recall, and this is a big callback to 2019 actually here, in the early stages of coronavirus in China. They had it in October, and around the same time in October, there was also everything happening. Remember when we thought Syria was on the edge of a civil war?
Yeah.
So this is kind of fallout from that, and remaining collateral from that, if you will. So Iranian forces have continued to. I want to make sure I get this right. Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, Iranian-backed militias and militia groups have conducted at least one attack against U.S. troops in the Middle East. Recently, I think as early as Wednesday was the last one. Where is it at? Yeah, so the attack on a border crossing station in eastern Syria is the first lethal operation ordered by the Biden administration against Iran's network of armed proxies. It was authorized in response to recent attacks against American and coalition personnel in Iraq and to ongoing threats. Shout out to Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby for the statement. So this is... You'll remember we were all upset because the Trump administration didn't do anything to Russia because Russia troops are backing Syrian forces fighting against Turkish forces and had the region kind of really on the edge of a civil war that was already on the edge of happening. Really just pushed it a lot closer. And these aren't like directly linked, obviously. And it is more of a retaliation against Iran than anything, but that it is in Syria, it will bring that back around. And also, if you tie it to what happened with statements made today by the Biden administration, because today is also the 7-year anniversary of the annexation of Crimea from Ukraine, the stealing of Crimea from Ukraine by Russian troops 7 years ago, so that would have been 2013. I remember that. I was on Tumblr when that happened. Not important, but that's what I was doing whenever that happened. So there's a lot going on, diplomatically speaking, if you want to put it in really heavy air quotes there. So yeah, instead of capitalizing on campaign promises to help American people directly, the Biden administration found it to be more pertinent this week to respond to Iranian threats in the region at a time when we were trying to work with Iran to get a nuclear arms agreement back, bring back the Iran nuclear arms deal from 2015. But instead, here we are launching airstrikes against Iranian-backed troops in Syria. So yeah, it's always great whenever like bad dudes get wiped out, and drone strikes are fucking awful because obviously it leaves civilians at risk too, and we don't have any numbers of civilians killed in these attacks. So it's frustratingly tone deaf for Democrats in the Biden administration to say, you know what, we know people in the country need direct relief right now. We know one of the major points that Trump, and we're trying not to talk about him and the administration much, Republicans much on this podcast right now. One of the things that got us on was foreign wars. So first thing we should do is, instead of getting the direct payments to people that we promised, instead of $2,000 checks, raising minimum wage, getting a COVID bill passed day one, as they kept saying they would. Let's bomb Syria. So it's just frustrating. It's tone deaf, and it's one of those things that keeps frustrating. And maybe it's just Democratic Twitter that gets upset about this kind of shit. But it is something that is seen and noticed by people who pay attention to things and observe. And we talked last week about how voters are not stupid. The American voter has changed over the past 15 years, past decade, because the internet has made it so people can keep up with every politician. They can follow around, literally, we were able to today. There was a photo shared of Pete Buttigieg riding a rideshare bicycle through D.C., looking like an absolute goofball. And imagine seeing that and knowing that about a politician. It's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that Pete Buttigieg using a rideshare, but could you imagine a rideshare bicycle and us having, a picture of it? But could you imagine us having that kind of rapid information 10 years ago? No, you can't. And could you even think about it 15 years ago? No, you can't. The ability to have information about politicians and what politicians are doing and what the literal happenings in D.C. Is there and so readily available to people that it's hard to get away with being as tone deaf as I think the Biden administration is trying to do right now with Syria, or in regards to today's bombing in Syria and their lack of action on checks on the $15 hour minimum wage. That's all. More alarming news from the January 6th riot, the insurrection, where the Capitol Police Chief, the acting Chief of the U.S. Capitol Police, I should say, warned lawmakers yesterday that extremists involved in the Jan 6 riot want to blow up the Capitol and kill as many members as possible during the State of the Union, which again, would that be coming up now, or would that have already happened, traditionally speaking?
Would it have already happened?
I feel like we're a little deep in February. I think it happens in January usually, but everything going on. I don't know if they do it in election year. But anyway, are you pulling that up? I mean,
I'm doing some bad Googling, but in case you were curious, the first one ever was January 8th, 1790.
Thank you. So the first ADU was January 8th, 1790. But I think it does traditionally take place in January, I think. But anyway, it hasn't been scheduled yet, but we know that there are now open threats to do exactly what the show Lone Survivor, starring Kiefer Sutherland, is about, where they bomb the Capitol. We saw an Amazon trailer for it the other day, where they bomb the Capitol during the State of the Union, and Kiefer Sutherland, gets to take over as president, and apparently people like it quite a lot. But I don't think we would like it quite a lot if it actually happened in real life. So all we can do is hope that people are ready for that whenever the State of the Union is finally scheduled for, whenever it does actually happen. And it just goes to show that the threat is ongoing. They got their votes in on January 6th. Biden was, presidency was sealed and signed off to him on January 6th, despite everything that happened. But as we're seeing, that doesn't end the threat of extremist white nationalist violence in this country, because we've let it ferment for too long. So now it's likely here to stay, all of the way of a Hezbollah or an Al-Qaeda would be.
Trump's first State
in a different world.
Was in 2018. That's confusing. Are they not supposed to give one until a year in?
Maybe. I guess you shouldn't really be talking about the State of the Union 3 weeks into your presidency, but at the same time, maybe you should, So the House also voted yesterday to pass the Equality Act. It's a far-reaching measure that would prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. I think this is one of the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene was hanging that sign out front of her office over. There's a big week for trans rights on the Hill. Shout out to the Hill. Because also Biden nominated Pennsylvania's health secretary to be his health secretary, and she's the first openly transgender person to serve in a major office in the United States government. So obviously they had that hearing this week, and I'm sure that had something to do with Marjorie Taylor Greene's sign that she hung out in front of her office. We're not going to talk too much about it because it was fucking stupid and gross. And we're tired of talking about sucky people on here. That's why I know Trump's doing CPAC on Sunday, and we were listening to the other pod yesterday, and they were talking about CPAC, and I'm like, I don't want to fucking talk about CPAC anymore. I don't want to talk about Trump anymore. I think, and they touched on it a little bit, and I think we should touch on it here. There's definitely so it's interesting because everything Trump does from now on, because he is a former president and because we know he has this rabid fan base and this pull to totalitarianism that just lives deep inside the moral fiber of his being, so everything he does should be at least made aware of the people. Everybody should know whenever he is doing something, and maybe there should be a quote from him or someone covering him. But I really hope that the media and all of us who consume media don't start giving and pining for a 24-hour where in the world is Donald Trump segment, or where is Trump speaking this week? What did he say this week? Because I feel like for the past, it's been a month of Biden's presidency, and we haven't heard much from Trump. It's been nice to not hear much from Trump. Honestly, the most we heard Trump's name is whenever people talk about how little we've heard from Trump and how he hasn't been using his platforms to, he could still pull the national media in at any time, and he could do things like he's doing at CPAC, giving the final speech to close out the event on Sunday this week. And he'll have his moments to do that too, but we don't need to comment every time he doesn't say something either. And I just hope that we find a way to limit his exposure in the national spotlight, because I think I've always been a firm believer that the more you strangle something, the less likely it is to happen. I know that was debunked a bit. I used to believe that about school shootings. I used to believe that if the media, and this is shitty, I used to think that showing live coverage of school shootings was a little fucked up. And I still do believe that live coverage of school shootings is a little fucked up. I know that
I think that's fair to say.
When a school shooting happens, I think it's kind of ridiculous that we immediately have a CNN crew on the scene and camp there for 72 hours doing coverage on it. And I know it's important news. I know it's important stories, and it's things that need covered. But at the same time, I do believe that kind of attention, and I know a lot of the time school shooters and people doing violence, it's not about getting attention anymore, and it never really was so much about that. But it still can provide inspiration to others to carry out attacks because they see how easy it was to happen, like in the case of the insurrection, or in the case of any of these school shootings. Like, I remember when Sandy Hook happened. I was in college and I was watching it on my TV, and you had a whole 72-hour nonstop news cycle devoted to it. And I'm thinking at home, what about, or in my college dorm, like, what about the kid sitting at home right now thinking about how he wants to do this at his school? And he sees, oh, shoot, I can do this, and I'll be, the name of the week for the week. And people will, maybe I'll inspire someone to do it at their place. And people like me will start feeling like, we can do this, and we'll have the repercussions, but at least we'll get done what we want to get done. And, you have to worry about that. I think that's what you do have to worry about.
I also think a lot of the coverage is messed up in the sense that, like, for the kids and everything. I always feel bad when they have, like, footage, like, of the kids while they're still at the school,
or the kids running out of the building. Like, remember, I think it was at the Parkland shooting. At Parkland shooting, they showed the lines of kids walking in caterpillar motion to get out of the building. What does this do for any of us? What does this do?
And Sandy Hook, they always showed the pictures of the kids like lined up outside, like literally kids crying.
Yeah,
and, like get out of there.
Get out of there. Like at a point, it's like, yes, it's a news story and it should be covered, and we need to know everything about it when it happens. That way, people like Alex Jones, who do say things like, "Well, the media should have covered school shootings because it gets guns in people's hands," and like.
Don't try to do an Alex Jones impression.
It was a good Alex Jones impression.
It was good, but
it was a good Alex Jones impression. It's gonna kill me to do it, but that was a good Alex Jones impression. You don't get that anywhere else.
Awful person.
Awful person. You know what I mean? These crisis actors in there, they're all just they're mosing around. They got their guns. Antifa shows up. Anyways, I'm sorry.
Anyway,
I'm sorry. So that's why I fear that if we cover Trump too much,
it's just going to keep providing inspiration.
It
for
just
other people,
keeps, other people. You get Ted Cruz says more things.
Yeah, well, we saw
Howie says more things, and politicians just start doing business as usual as it was before Jan 6, and I feel like we should use Jan 6 as a moment to move on from that sort of politics.
Well, we saw how Trump getting removed from Twitter, like the percentage of misinformation that went down was significant.
It's a better place,
so,
and their stocks went up.
The less attention you give him, the better it is for everyone. Like, of course, we can't keep him from going to CPAC and doing all that things, but you cannot cover it.
Well, I mean, and
if you want to give a recap, that's
what I'm saying. It's fine. Give us a recap, but I know.
Don't make it 24/7.
They're gonna fucking cancel the Sunday shows this week, and it's gonna be live coverage of Trump's CPAC address on CNN and MSNBC and all of them, and it's gonna be carried live, and it's gonna do literally, and then they're gonna ask Biden to talk about it and comment, and it's gonna be, oh well, Joe didn't say anything about it, he's being weak, and then we have that for 2 fucking weeks to deal with whenever we're in the middle of a pandemic that though it's waning and though the steps have been taken so far to like curb a pandemic, thankfully. It's going to take attention away from it, and we have a Trump-fueled circus for 2 weeks because the media just can't get enough of the guy. And I really feel like that's the biggest danger we face right now, aside from white nationalism, is fanning the flames of white nationalism by giving a microphone to the chief white nationalist, Donald Trump. And that is what we end up with if we go and talk to him and talk about him every chance we get. And I just hope that the media finds a way not to do that. Yeah, so long Trump rant. Hopefully one of the last ones we get on this podcast ever. And I think that's how we'll probably end the pod today. I don't have anything else. I have nothing else here. Spring training started.
Did you talk about the Cuomo stuff already?
We touched on the Cuomo stuff. We should talk about the Cuomo stuff, though. So Cuomo's in a lot of hot water right now. Thank you for reminding me of this. Every day, things get worse and worse for Andrew Cuomo.
As they should.
As they should. We're not a big Cuomo standing household.
This is a Cynthia Nixon household.
This was a Nixon household.
Voted for it.
Am I a Carrie? To my fucking core.
Oh, God. You're not. And she's not a Carrie either.
Well, Miranda?
She's Miranda.
I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying. I'm a Carrie. Should I vibe so much with Cynthia?
You're not a Carrie.
What am I then?
I don't know.
I've never seen it. You know who loved Desperate?
You're probably more of a Miranda.
Not Desperate Housewives. Fucking, why'd I call it
Sex and the City.
Sex and the City? My dad.
Your dad
Burn
likes Sex
Patron
and the City?
loves Sex and the
You
City.
should text your dad and ask which character.
That's how. You remember we were home.
Oh yeah, we were talking about Cynthia Nixon.
And he goes,
Miranda.
Awesome. So no. Yeah. So Cuomo is obviously in a kind of no-win position, thank goodness, and thank goodness for that, because you don't get to victory lap a pandemic before the pandemic is over.
That's going to add fuel to fun. That's honestly
what bugs me most about it.
And they're probably going to use it in the case. The fact that he was so confident that he did well.
Yeah, and there's no case yet, but there's talk of there being an impeachment of him or calling for his resignation, and there is an investigation ongoing into how he handled the nursing homes, because the nursing home situation is entirely fucked up. He was putting people with coronavirus into nursing homes to care for them in nursing homes, and then infecting the people in nursing homes, causing people in nursing homes to die whenever they otherwise may not have died. So honestly, I find him culpable for a lot of death. And, he played politics with it. He tried to keep hospitalization numbers down, to kind of play with the statistics to make it look like the problem was waning here in New York whenever it truly was not. We were just hiding sick, dying old people who were sick and dying of coronavirus with people who were sick, old, and dying of other things that they probably could have lived with had Cuomo not filled these nursing homes up with sick people and infected all these other sick people. Bless you. And now you get this, and this is what he deserves for that, honestly. And I hope he does resign. I hope it'd be the right thing for him to do. It'd be better than the state running an impeachment on him. It'd be better than us waiting for, him to give us a half-baked apology on what he did on the nursing homes, and then getting to just do what Cuomo does, which is threaten and berate and bully the people around him. And he's not going to. He's not going to. And it's just because he's so much of hey, here I am, I have to be a tough politician, I'm a tough guy, I don't do nothing wrong, I'm confident in myself and my abilities. And it's the most annoying thing about him is that he just can't say, you know what, I was wrong, I did literally the thing that won me an Emmy, was saying that I was gonna play.
Which they should retract that.
I was gonna play facts, and I know him winning an Emmy shouldn't be the biggest problem we have with this. But he won an Emmy for his press briefings because the people who give out Emmys said that he did a great job giving reliable, real information to people that helped get through the coronavirus and did it in an entertaining and helpful way.
That's so stupid.
But now here we are finding out that he literally exacerbated the problem by literally killing thousands of elderly people by stuffing more COVID into nursing homes and acting like it wasn't happening. He literally, and then going on TV and making bad faith arguments about the problem in nursing homes and saying that the problem is in nursing homes and that it's getting better, but there's not much we can do about it. Whenever he was knowingly making it worse in nursing homes. And it's sickening and it's disgusting and it's literally, it killed people. And we luckily we're in a borough here, shout out to Queens. I was reading the Washington Post article about it this morning, And our guy, shout out to Kerry out in Flushing, his representative Ron Kim has been one of the most vocal people on this issue, because Queens has so many nursing homes and has so many elderly people in it and had such a huge loss of life in this borough alone because of these kind of government failures by people who said that they were going to, by a man who said he was going to put facts first and not politics, and then here he is playing politics and literally killing people. The exact thing he said that Trump was doing. Everything that he criticized Trump for doing for 6 months there, and rightfully criticized him for doing, he himself was doing behind all of our backs and killing people and making the problem here in New York worse. And it should disqualify him from office should he be able to run again in 2022 here, I believe, is when the next governor election is, or election for governor, 2023, 2022, or whatever. They were saying how it should have been an easy re-election for him and how he was the gold standard for governors. Emmy winner, had his victory lap, had his bestseller book, wrote about his leadership in a time of struggle. And yeah, sure, maybe things could be a lot worse, and maybe we should keep that in account. That, you know, no, because things were terrible there. There were 3 months there where we didn't have a day go by where we didn't hear 10 sirens outside our window. There were days that we didn't miss Cuomo's briefings because we thought he was giving us real good information, and most of it was real good information. But he lied to us about nursing homes, where the largest problem was, where you could argue the most tragic loss of life was happening every day and in mass, and he acted as if there was something we could do to stop that, but there was, and it was to stop putting coronavirus in these nursing homes, and he continued to just do it. So I don't know if they can impeach him. I don't know if they should impeach him, but I think he should step away and just let's see what happens in 2022, because he is disqualified now, and I don't think excuse me, I don't think New Yorkers would vote for him again. I think he's probably lost New York City, at least. We were talking about this last night, Carrie and I, how like the makeup of New York City politics is actually kind of rapidly changing.
I think he's lost more than just New York City, though, because this is an issue that happened statewide.
Yeah,
you know.
But the problem then now does become for the Democratic Party here is that this was a Democratic governor, though he does rule as a Republican, and he, you know, we're in a state that though we are blue, we are getting redder. You can look at Staten Island. You can look at parts of Brooklyn, parts of Upper Manhattan. The voting population of New York is changing a little bit, and, you know, the outer parts around Buffalo and upstate, they get redder and they get more turned out every election. We could be looking at a situation, and that's what I'm saying, even in the city, where we could get to a point in 22 where we do have an actual contest here now for the governor of the state. We could be living in a Republican-governed state here very easily if you just look at how the voting trends have been. And I know that sounds like a long shot, but, you know, who knows who else is on the ticket in 2022? Does one of the Trumps try to run in 2022 here in New York? Who knows?
Like, just because a state might be a blue state doesn't mean, like, it's because this is with Massachusetts too. Massachusetts is a staunchly blue state, and yet I've lived through far more Republican governors than Democratic governors. They have a Republican governor right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, my mom says he kind of is more of a moderate. You know, she says he does agree with both sides, which is great. But, like, I lived through Mitt Romney being governor growing up, and that's such a blue state. So it doesn't matter just because a state is blue. Because of the way districts are set up and everything, like, you can still very easily switch over to a Republican governor.
I wouldn't be surprised if we got to a point here where, and I know the polarization of New York is already pretty obvious, where we have New York City is obviously the progressive beacon of the state, and, you know, the further out you get, it gets redder and redder. I wouldn't be surprised if we were to a point in the near future where New York City wasn't necessarily a Democratic lock anymore either. Because, like, I mean, Queens, we're getting bluer and more progressive rapidly. The Bronx, the same thing. Brooklyn, the same thing. And I mean, the mayor race this year is going to mean a lot. I think the mayor race is going to really set the tone for New York politics probably for the next decade, because I think obviously everybody running in New York's mayor race is going to be pretty much racing to the left, you have to assume, while trying not to alienate. It's going to be almost a mirror image of what the presidential race was. Just if the presidential race only mattered to Democratic voters.
Yeah.
So it's really going to be a matter of these politicians going as far left as they can without losing too much of or suppressing turnout from moderate groups that could push them over the top against someone that might be a little more progressive than them. So I think we're going to be seeing what is in store for New York politics within the next few months and few weeks with this Cuomo thing, but even more so with this mayoral race that we have coming up. And I don't know, it'll just be, it's because we even for months said that Cuomo was doing a fine enough job. We were satisfied. But that's because he was lying to us.
Yeah, he was lying to us. And also, in the beginning, it was just, he was establishing himself so opposite of Trump that it's easy to look good when you're establishing yourself as the opposite of Trump. And my mom brought up a good point when we were talking about this, is that, like, Cuomo seemed to do a good job in the beginning, but he continued to blame the federal government constantly, which we're not saying the federal government was not to blame for lack of resources, because they were.
Absolutely.
But a lot of other states that were also blaming the federal government figured out a plan and got it done.
Yeah.
But Cuomo just continued to blame the federal government, and he lied to us about how things were going, and I get it. Like, I know you wanted to get more help, and we did need more help, but at a point you just have to say, okay, this is the circumstances we've been given, and we got to do something. You can't continue to waste time. And so much of even the vaccine rollout has been him trying to micromanage things and not allowing people to, and not delegating the way he needs to, like, really just poor leadership all around.
Like, he was taking people, putting them in nursing homes so they would die in nursing homes so he could count them as nursing home deaths so it wouldn't seem like as big of a problem.
Yeah.
This is fucking crazy. It's just so crazy. And then lying about the numbers of deaths in nursing homes related to coronavirus. It's just unbelievable. The stuff I was doing. Anyway, that's the pod for the week. We'll be back next week. We'll see what's going on. Thank you for joining us. You've made it this far. You have to subscribe now. You have to like us. You have to be our friend. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.